And now the latest on the tensions between North Korea and the United States. And President Trump says that military action is not his first choice in dealing with the increasing threat posed by Pyongyang. The U.S. is calling for the UN to impose crippling sanctions on North Korea, including an oil embargo, a freeze on Kim Jong-un and other officials' assets, and a ban on textile exports from the country. Well, we're joined now by Anthony Ruggiero from the Washington-based Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's a sanctions expert, so let's talk to him about those now. All of this talk of tougher sanctions on top of those that we know are already in place. And this, of course, coming after Russian President Vladimir Putin has said sanctions are useless. He said the North Koreans would rather eat grass than give up their nuclear program. So is there any hope that sanctions can be effective?
Well, there is hope, and the problem here, frankly, is that Russia and China are violating the sanctions, whether they're UN sanctions or US sanctions. So when President Putin says that sanctions don't work, they don't work because Russian companies and Russian individuals are selling goods to North Korean proliferation companies, and they are also doing US dollar transactions for energy sales to North Korea in violation of US law.
Right. And the Chinese are also one of the key suppliers of crude oil. These are one of the things that the UN Security Council is looking to try to bring into place to stop exports to North Korea of crude oil. Now, assuming that these UN Security Council members come into line, will it be truly that simple? Will these changes actually lead to a change of behavior in North Korea?
Well, the issue here really is that UN resolutions are not self-enforcing. And what we have learned over the 11 years of UN resolutions is that when China and Russia and frankly, other countries, whether those are countries in Africa or in Europe or in Southeast Asia, continue to do business with North Korea in violation of these sanctions, there's no way that it will change North Korea's behavior. And that's where the U.S. comes in. Using the Iran sanctions as an example, they can build a coalition of like-minded countries like they did with Iran, and they could force these countries to abide by the UN sanctions and U.S. sanctions. And then that eventually will change North Korea's behavior.
And so in terms of what has worked with Iran, for instance, historically, do you think that those same sanctions, as you suggest, would work for North Korea, or are there more complicated issues at play here?
Well, I mean, there's differences between Iran and North Korea, but in terms of the more general points of implementing sanctions in a holistic way, that has been proven to work, focusing on the financial aspect of sanctions, going after banks. We went after European banks, fined them over $12 billion for Iran sanctions violations. But you're right, the difference here is when you have 85 to 90% of North Korea's trade is with China, it's always going to come back to China. So if the United States is not willing to go after China, that's going to be a problem. But the Trump administration has started that. They've gone after China since May 6 separate times. And I believe they are moving up the escalation ladder, that the next time it'll be after a medium or large size Chinese financial institution.
All right, Anthony Ruggiero there from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Thank you for joining us.